Hi everyone, welcome to my review of War for the Planet of the Apes in 2017. Once again, of course, directed by Matt Reeves. And here we are, this 4K steelbook here, wonderful steelbook, of course. And yes, a film that, of course, I watched, of course, 2 weeks ago, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and reviewed that. And yes, here we are with the final one to review in the whole, franchise here. I've reviewed all the films now. War for the Planet of the Apes. Now, yes, been really looking forward to rewatching this. I'd only seen it once before. I got this kind of pretty much as soon as the steelbook was released in 2017, so around about November 2017, I believe. And yes, this film is kind of divisive, but it's still very very acclaimed. Certainly, probably the most acclaimed of the trilogy, the new trilogy, and of course, yes, it's on. It appeared on quite a lot of lists of best films of 2017, top 10 kind of material here, we're talking. And yes, once I saw this, I kind of, before this, I thought, it's probably not going to top Dawn. That was just an exceptional film. But the trailers made it look amazing once again, and I had kind of faith that, Matt Reeves was returning, so I thought, this could be really something here. And yes, of course, the original Planet of the Apes, I've said before, that really is so hard to top, but I did kind of hint, in the original the review of that, that maybe one of the later ones, comes close at least. Of course, Dawn did not, for me, not quite. I think it's a masterpiece, stunning film, but not really to the level of the original. In '68, I think that film is just really a flawless masterpiece that really just moves me. It kind of just it fuels my imagination, and it's just so entertaining. Charlton Heston, it's just one of the best sort of characters he plays in film, and it's just a perfect film from start to finish. The ending, of course, as well. Wonderful ending. And of course, this film, is a bit divisive. It's said to be at times, kind of, just flat and kind of boring at times, and just not really on the level of Dawn. And some say even Rise. And it's kind of among fans, you could say it's the least popular of the trilogy. But for me, once I saw this film, it blew me away once again, and yes, I think this is by far the best of the new trilogy, and here's the announcement. This is the film, for me, that actually tops the original, so yes, very, very special in that sense, For it to top the original, it really has to be something exceptional, and that film I've seen, I saw that first when I was 8 years old or something like that, and must have been that, and it was absolutely stunning, I got blown away, and I never really thought, the other ones could top this, and for this to top, the original really is something, and for me, it just goes above and beyond, certainly what Rise did for me, and Dawn as well. This trilogy for me gets better with each film, and it's just one of the best, certainly modern trilogies, and probably among the best of all time. Definitely top sort of 20 trilogies probably of all time, I would say, and just a wonderful ending, emotionally stirring. What this film does really is goes back to kind of the roots of the original, the adventureness, of this, the kind of the survival elements, definitely more kind of desperate and barren at times, more kind of small scale in many ways, but the scope does feel, just as big, if not more. I think actually it feels grander than Dawn. It's kind of in a couple locations mainly. Of course, that had more action in it. This is called War for the Planet of the Apes, but you'd be surprised. There's not actually anywhere near as much action, you could say, as Dawn in many regards, and not as much sustained, kind of constant sort of battling, there and stuff. And it's not really got any use of cities in the film. It's much more small in that sense, and kind of going to different settlements. It's set 2 years, of course, after the events of Dawn. And basically, very early on, and this has got minor spoilers, this review, I won't be mentioning anything in the second half, but, very early on in the film, Colonel, one of the colonels, basically, who's played by Woody Harrelson, kills the family of Caesar, and, the apes are getting attacked constantly, and yes, basically, you soon learn that Caesar wants to take revenge. He wants to avenge his family, and actually he's had enough. And he pursues the colonel. They follow, him and a couple of others, including Maurice, follow, the army, this kind of faction, kind of rogue faction that there is, Alpha Omega, and basically, yeah, the rest of the film, events happen in the second half. I'm not going to get into, but yes, it does go back to the roots of the original, and in some regards, it goes back to some stuff that happened in Rise with the kind of the capturing and stuff. Very, very different to Dawn, but again, it is more more action, you know, kind of the same sort of action you could expect from Dawn, just very, very different in its approach and kind of, you know, placement throughout the film. Very, very different structure in that sense. But yes, I think this film really does everything right, and just goes beyond, you know, what I'd expect from this film. When I saw the trailer, I thought, yes, as I say, you know, that could be amazing. But it really done something that I thought really none of them could. And really, for me, this is the most emotional Planet of the Apes film. The original was really, really moving stuff. It was very, very tragic and everything. And Dawn, of course, for me, didn't quite, you know, reach, as I say, the heights of the original. But it done something really beyond rise. And then this one just goes way beyond any of them. You know, it just goes to a spiritual level. It goes to, you know, very, very subtle films at times. And you know, it's not, as I say, it's not quite as kind of straight away action focused, you know, as Dawn, but it has got the kind of the scene at the beginning where it straight away involves you in the action. But then most of the film for a time it is very, very kind of somber and kind of you know, desperate, you could say. It's more about the survival and how they kind of the apes are, they're falling. You know, the numbers are dwindling, and kind of Caesar as well is kind of has lost a lot of hope, but he's hell bent on kind of avenging his family. And it also makes some really, really genius comparisons between him and Cobra, of course, and the kind of the way, you know, he basically wants revenge and stuff, and you know, he can't escape his anger in that sense. I loved what they've done there, and Toby Kebbell makes small appearances in the film in that regard. And yes, you know, this film just you know, the first act is mainly you know, kind of course, the tragic events of the first bits, and then of course you've got the journey, and then, you know, the rest of the film mostly is set in the snow, and a lot of this at this base, of course, for Alpha Omega. Woody Harrelson comes into play. He plays the Colonel, and wow, he is absolutely stunning in this film. You know, he really is something else. I think he's a great actor overall. He's been great in so many things. True Detective as well, recently. In this film, of course, he basically is very, very obvious references to Apocalypse Now. Of course, Colonel Kurtz, you know, of course, and yes, his character is very, very similar to that, you know, and stuff. Very, very kind of unhinged, you know, sort of leader here. And yes, you know, it kind of taps into a lot of the same sort of themes that film does within this. And yes, basically, he shows no mercy, and of course, the apes are captured, you know, and of course, it's just such a satisfying kind of second half of the film. The ending, you know, it's just, for me, one of the best in modern cinema. And yes, you've just got so many kind of compelling character studies here. And of course, it explores madness as well, like Apocalypse Now. And yes, it's just what this film goes, you know, where this film goes in terms of the emotions is really just, it's undescribable. You know, the final 10 minutes of the film, just after the kind of massive set piece, you know, that epic set piece, you know, for me that's probably, well, definitely better than anything in Dawn for me. I know people say the action's better in Dawn, but I don't quite agree with that. You know, I think Dawn has some stunning set pieces, really, really mind-blowing, but this one tops it. And yeah, basically the last 10 minutes goes to emotions that, you know, none of the other films for me even come close to. And, you know, it all comes together there. And you kind of see, you know, what this trilogy is trying to do, and it's just truly, truly wonderful, so moving. You know, I think this one has the biggest heart of the trilogy. It's the most human film, I think. Actually, you know, the final act and everything, and just overall the whole film is really one of the most human blockbusters. Kind of certainly of the 2010s. This is what, you know, I kind of I should expect. A lot of these modern action films, there are great ones, but you know, a lot of them. A lot of the time now, you know, there's too much kind of business overtaking art and human emotions. It's a real shame, but you know, I think there are great ones, especially a lot of the Marvel ones, of course, which seem to get the most hate. But this and you know, films like Mad Max is how you do it. You know, how you should kind of what you should aspire to if you're going to go this way. This one combines emotion, stunning action, and just a wonderful kind of humanity to all, and it's just truly wonderful. The communication as well is another theme that it taps into once again. The character of Nova, she's basically this girl who kind of well, they basically, she has no parents, and they kind of take her in and travel with her. Great character. I love all this. It's just really wonderful stuff. Maurice, the relationship there, is just so uplifting. And yes, basically, she can't speak. In this film, of course, they tap into how eventually, humans stopped, being able to speak. So that kind of weaves its way into the film, and she's a character that can't. And as I say, it's kind of a nod to the originals. The Nova character in the original, two films she was in, I believe. Yes, it was. And yes, it's just wonderful how it kind of explores that. It taps into the whole kind of mythology more than the other two for me. They're not really aspiring them films to really be part of the timeline as much. But this one kind of, it's its own thing. It's its own personal story, but it does kind of sort of reference at least and kind of touch base with other, some of the stuff in the grand scheme of things. And yes, you've got such a wonderful ending, as I say. What this film does for me as well, better than the other two. It's just so patient. This film, I think, the subtleties, the acting as well. Andy Serkis, really gives his best performance of the trilogy. Not the best mocap from him. Of course, Lord of the Rings for me, but yes. This is monumental. I was shocked at how good he was in this film, what they've done here. The CGI, let's talk about that, of course. Many have criticised Rise, and I kind of did as well a little bit for having kind of slightly flawed CGI there. It was still overall very, very impressive, what they were doing there and stuff. This one has a smaller budget than Dawn, but it has the best CGI of the trilogy. And what they've done here for me was really, I think, in terms of the 2010s, this could have the best CGI, just in a film in general. I think it's absolutely stunning what they've done here. The apes, they look so realistic. There's literally very, very little, if not any flaws in any of the CGI here. With the facial, expressions, the strands of hair, everything is absolutely stunning. And of course, it just makes me more immersed in the experience. And there's no kind of off-putting moments, at times Rise especially had. Dawn didn't really, but this one just looks so much better than Dawn even. And I just thought, wow, it just blew me away when I first saw it. There's usually, a lot of CGI. There is some flaws, but this is one of the films that really is pretty much perfect in that sense. The visuals overall, cinematography as well, is mind-blowing. This film is shot to perfection. The editing here is stunning, and of course the action throughout the film. For me, as I say, it is the best of the trilogy, and it tops even Dawn in pretty much every way of the action. It's really stunning here. The scenes as well, the end, it's absolutely stunning. You've got so many kind of operatic moments in this film, especially in the second half. The action, as I say, the final act of this, is absolutely mind-blowing. You've got this massive sustained sequence, towards the end of the film, of just basically non-stop action, but the mixture of drama, of course, in there is absolutely stunning. What it kind of doesn't never lose its focus of the narrative, the characters, which for me as well, this film, of all the Planet of the Apes films, really has the best narrative. It's the most emotionally engaging for me, and just kind of effortless kind of storytelling here. And yes, the final set piece is massive sequence, but you've got these very, very small and intricate moments. You're always aware of the kind of progression of it's kind of the showdown in that sense, the intricate details here, the rising in tension. You've got all these little moments of tension that kind of just never breaks the flow of this massive action scene sequence, and it's stunning, it really is. And of course, the tragedy in there as well. I'm not going to ruin different things, but yes, of course there are losses in this film, and yes, of course, you've got the final 10 minutes of the film, as I say, which is just so emotional for me. Really, really moved me, actually. And yes, I think probably my favourite ending, of the Planet of the Apes films. I think the original probably, in terms of, just a cinematic ending, that's probably the best, you could say. But for me, just, what I felt from the ending in that sense, for me, this is the best, in that sense. And it's just so emotional. It really, really moved me to tears, of course. And yes, this whole film is just perfect for me. I think, of course, Michael Giacchino's score is absolutely wonderful. I've kind of said before, I thought the Rise score was probably the best, but actually, listen to it again. Of course, I've only seen this film once before, 2 years ago, and yes, listen to it again. I think this is probably the best of the trilogy, and actually, the whole series really, in that sense. It's just really, really just beautiful. It's epic. It's used to perfection to kind of move the film and let it flow, and kind of the operatic nature, of course. But again, there's moments many sequences that really don't have much music in them. Very subtle film at times, but again, it's just as epic, if not more, for me. To Dawn. So it's not a film that kind of sacrifices the action and stuff for that. But I think the way this film progresses, the kind of desperation of it, it just makes me even more emotionally attached to the characters because it's kind of a smaller group as well. It's more focused, but again, it feels bigger in scope, really. Certainly to Rise, because that felt a bit too mainstream, kind of big. I think the kind of when there was more of the scientists and stuff, and the government in general, and the army involved in that, it kind of lessened the kind of the scope of it, if you know what I mean. This one definitely feels like it is, more of a Planet of the Apes film, and it just the scope, the sweep of this, the adventure kind of spirit. It's got great comedy in the film, even. It's a very dark film, very kind of emotional, but it has got moments of comedy. Steve Zahn, of course, plays Bad Ape. He's referred to in the film, and he basically comes into it quite early on. He adds a lot of the comedy to the film, but as a character that in a lot of other films, certainly now, it would have probably could easily have fallen into kind of annoying characters. Sort of case of they have to put kind of a comedy relief character in there, but I think really the comedy works perfectly, and it doesn't really break the tone at all, and it just adds the kind of the grounded feel of the film. It lightens it, of course. You've got great moments of comedy, kind of slapstick, you could say, but again, does not detract from the kind of emotions, the whole drama of the film, the investment to the narrative, and it never breaks tone, this film, at all. I think there's nothing generic in this film. It's all kind of unique and just so masterfully executed that I think, as I've said, no flaws for me whatsoever, the film. So of course, this film gets full marks from me, without a doubt. As I've said, there is literally no flaws I have with this film, whatsoever. And of course, the original Planet of the Apes, I think is among the best films of all time. Of course, I gave it 100. I didn't give it a plus, not quite. And of course, Dawn didn't either. That got 100. This film, as I've said, tops the original. For me, the greatest in the franchise. And yes, actually manages to edge it into my 100% plus tier 3. This film is stunning. It really is. It's everything I wanted from the film, and it's actually slightly better, for me when I've rewatched it now. Of course, previously only seen it once, and yes, that was it was 2017. I only saw it just after it came out, and then now rewatching it again, it's even better. I think the kind of the tragedy of it all, and of course, just watching this trilogy in kind of quick succession, while also, of course, a few months ago, of course, going through the originals, it just feels even more kind of just satisfying in many regards. It's very different, of course, to some of the original sequels, and it doesn't really, it's not completely linked, this trilogy, to the originals. The mythology and the timelines, it's kind of muddled a little bit, but again, for me, this one does more than the other two in the trilogy in terms of the grand scheme of things, but again, it feels even more personal than Dawn. It just feels, it's so patient, this film. There's never any sacrifices, kind of any sort of trends or anything. It's never given into that, kind of thing. It's just it's its own thing. The narrative is so masterful, always engaging for me. The emotional attachment I had to the characters, of course, and of course the way this is built up over the whole trilogy, especially in Dawn, very just masterfully. You've got this film. It's very different in tone and stuff, but again, for me, it's even more enjoyable. It's more emotionally investing. The action for me tops Dawn, therefore being the best in the franchise, and just the score, the cinematography, it's all better here. I think this film is absolutely stunning. One of the best films of the 2010s, among them, probably definitely top 30, I would say. And definitely one of the best modern action films of all time. I think just absolutely stunning. Yes, it's not it's not as kind of the script is not as kind of as I say, the twists and everything do not come into play as much as, say, the original, and it's not kind of more about the human interaction with the apes and stuff. It's not quite there. It's not doing that, but it has got of course wonderful communication themes in here, but again, it's just really the satisfying conclusion, the tragedy as well to this whole story, this narrative, and again, just a wonderful human film, very spiritual film, this, and just perfect for me in every way. If you've not seen the film, Highly recommend it. Of course, if you've not seen the whole trilogy, then get to it. You know, it's a wonderful trilogy. Among the best, as I say, probably top 25, top 30 of all time trilogies. It's just truly wonderful. There's not a bad film in this trilogy. They're all great for me. And of course, Dawn and War are absolute masterpieces. I think not everyone thinks this is as good as Dawn or Rise. As I say, it's probably the least popular film of the trilogy with the fans. It's probably the most critically acclaimed. But I think that there's no way. Personally, it compares. Rise compares to this. I can understand people say Dawn, of course. That is very, very different, and in its own right, it's of course a masterpiece. But for me, this one edges that out, and it goes beyond that in terms of the emotion, the action, the whole kind of the survival elements of the film, the atmosphere. That's the thing that it really just brought back from the original, more than the other two, of course. The atmosphere, just really, really so well built up. The kind of barren nature of a lot of it, and just the whole. As I say, the whole survival elements, the desperation, wasn't quite there in Dawn especially. And yes, Rise, but this film, for me, is the best of the trilogy and the best in the franchise. And yes, thanks for watching my review, of course. Wonderful film, really is something else. Wonderful human film. And yes, of course, within a few weeks I'll be doing the ranking. Of course, worst to best, or least favourite to favourite, we should say. And yes, of course. Haven't done a review, in a few days now. I've been busy, but there'll be more reviews coming. And of course, next week there won't be quite as much of a gap, between the reviews. But yes, of course. Thanks for watching.